The day finally arrived. A young woman picks up her bags and is happy not to have so many things to carry. Some maids ask if something is wrong, but she turns away without saying anything. Later at the mansion, the Duke asks the maids if Clare has left. One of them replies yes and hands him a letter left by Clare. Apparently it's a divorce agreement. The Duke can't believe what he's reading. Meanwhile, Clare is already in a departing carriage. She looks out of the carriage, wondering, I wonder if he has finally the one he truly loves. At the same time, she realizes she's thinking of him again. Even after everything, it still feels like she met him yesterday. Some time ago at a banquet, some noblewomen comment on the arrival of Duke Ian. All admire his beauty as he passes by. Duke Ian Eater was considered an incredible and desirable man. The noblewomen commented that he achieved great accomplishments as a knight while very young. It's incredible that he managed to fulfill his duties as a royal knight and still command a dukedom. In a corner of the banquet, Clare listened to the noblewomen commenting on who would be able to steal his heart. Her sister calls her from afar. As she approaches, showing off her extravagant dress, Amelia comments on how Clare is spacing out in the corner again, but perhaps that suited her plain dress. She then asks if by any chance she saw the Duke, as she would like to meet him. As Amelia walks away, someone asks Clare if she is part of Marquis Maurice's family. Surprised, she looks back and sees a butler. She asks him if someone is looking for her. He simply agrees and asks her to follow him. Upon arriving at one of the mansion's rooms, he then informs the young lady that they are waiting for her inside. Upon entering, she finds the Duke standing, waiting for someone. Before she can say anything, he says, Nice to meet you, Lady Clare. I'm from the Ader ducal family. I have an important matter to discuss with you, so that's why I called you here. After hearing the Duke's proposal, Clare is perplexed and asks him to explain better what he is proposing. The Duke understands it's a somewhat unexpected proposal, and Clare comments that he mentioned something like marriage. He agrees and says that is exactly the proposal. She pinches herself, thinking she might be dreaming, but it seems to be reality. Clare questions the proposal, stating that they barely know each other. The Duke then explains that they have met a few times at social events. However, as he will soon turn 25, his parents are pressuring him a lot to get married. And since he inherited the title of Duke, his parents are becoming increasingly intense about it. And if it continues like this, they might decide to put him in an arranged marriage. But the Duke confesses that he has someone he has loved since his childhood. He says he even tried to convince his parents that he would get engaged to the young woman and marry within a year. But his parents disagreed and told him to marry as soon as possible. Understanding the situation, Clare says his parents are probably worried that this marriage won't happen, as the Duke's beloved is very far away. Ian takes a sip of his tea, and then finally decides to propose the agreement, to marry Clare for only 1 year and if she can understand the situation. Looking at Duke Ian, she pinches herself one more time just to make sure it's not a dream. Honestly, I also wouldn't believe the most handsome and popular guy in the kingdom wanting to marry someone he barely knows out of nowhere. Finally, she replies, saying that even though the story is a bit confusing and hard to believe, she agrees to the arrangement. However, she decides to ask what we all want to know. There are so many women in the world. Why did he choose her? Ian explains that there are a few reasons, but the first and most important for his decision was the complicated financial situation the Maurice family is currently in. Clare, a little embarrassed, can only think of her family's situation. Formerly, the Maurice family was considered one of the highest-ranking noble families, but after a flood 10 years ago that destroyed a large part of their territory, in addition, several businesses that were set up to mitigate the flood damage ended up failing. And as a result, they ended up with an enormous debt. In other words, the Duke plans to use this marriage as a form of financial exchange. Responding then to the main reason, Clare says that in that case, why didn't the Duke choose her sister, since she is much more charming and outgoing? He replies that he had considered this hypothesis, but it is precisely because of her demeanor. While Clare is always dressed humbly, her sister dresses extravagantly. Impressed by his point of view, she realizes that he not only studied all possibilities, but also understands the nature of his actions. He concluded that this agreement would make no sense for someone who doesn't even have a notion of her family's crisis, which makes Clare agree. Clare asks if the reward for this contract will be financial support for her family, and the Duke replies, yes. A payment will be made to recover the family's failed businesses as a wedding dowry, in addition to financial help after 1 year. Surprised, she asks if she is that valuable, and Ian replies that it's actually more because this 1 year is very important to him. Clare realizes how much he must love that girl, and incredibly, he seems much more romantic than she expected, which surprises the protagonist, how he cannot ask for a dowry from her for the marriage and only ask her to act as the Duchess for 1 year and then divorce. It is then that Clare realizes that he wants her to move to his mansion and truly act as the Duchess of the house. He still warns. And of course, he offers to help in everything possible. The Duke asks what Clare thinks of the agreement. After all, it's a good deal for her family. And if everything goes well in this 1 year, in addition to all the payment to the family, he will also reward her. She says he is very generous. Clare knows that after a noble lady divorces, many return to their parents' home, and usually the family ends up arranging a new marriage of their choice. He further adds that if necessary, his family's influence can help arrange a good match for her, in addition to trying to avoid gossip in society so she can continue attending social events without shame. Claire comments that this is very generous of him. Ian comments that he knows the weight this will bring to her life, so this solution is the best he can do to help her. Claire replies that hearing him say that, it sounds very kind and sincere, but he agrees that a kind man would not make this kind of proposal. And he adds that if there's anything else she wants, a house, money, or whatever she thinks would be worth that year of her marriage, she can ask for it. She realizes how passionate he is, and after a short pause, she agrees to the agreement, but with one condition. She would like him to be the person to convince her parents about the marriage. Surprised, he asks if that's all she would like. Ian comments that he doesn't believe her parents would refuse a marriage proposal from a duke, but he agrees to the terms. The protagonist comments that if she receives her parents' approval for the marriage, she would accept this agreement, actually correcting the word agreement to stand in marriage. A few days after establishing the agreement, the Duke already started to move. A letter arrived saying that he would like to discuss something with her parents. And before she even realized it, the day of Ian's visit arrived. Claire noticed that the house was very agitated by his arrival. As she hung the laundry with her calloused hands, she thought this reaction was normal. After all, she hadn't told her parents anything, partly because she had entrusted this to Duke Ian, but also because she knows her parents wouldn't believe her if she had told them. Already in the drawing room, the Duke thanks them for setting aside time from their schedule to receive him and says he would like to make a request to the Marquis. "I would like your permission to marry your daughter," the Duke says, leaving the Marquis and the Marchioness in shock with the news. The Marquise asks about the proposal again to make sure he heard correctly. The Duke confirms that it is indeed so and asks if by any chance he is not suitable. The Marquis promptly asks the butler to call his daughter as quickly as possible, while the Duke thinks how easy it was. Given the way Claire had told him the other day, it seemed to be something very difficult. After a few minutes, the door opens, and Amelia, all elegant, introduces herself, apologizing for having kept him waiting. Her parents are proud, impressed that their daughter had this kind of relationship with the Duke. Meanwhile, Ian realized what was happening. Amelia approaches the Duke, saying that she hadn't realized what he felt for her, and perhaps he could have told her before. He was not referring to Amelia, but rather asking to marry Lady Clare. Everyone is shocked how such a plain girl could be the Duchess. Realizing that he got up and left the room, the family quickly runs after him to understand the situation. While walking through the mansion, Ian realizes that since the moment he arrived, something seemed wrong. Compared to the family's financial situation, all the furniture was strangely very luxurious. Clearly, if they sold some of these paintings, they would probably be able to buy several dresses for their daughter. Upon reaching the end of the corridor, he spots Clare passing by and says that he finally found her. He approaches and calls her "my beloved," while an embarrassed Claire doesn't quite know what to answer. Amelia gets annoyed, asking her sister for an explanation. Claire replies that what Mr. Ian said is indeed true, and she accepted the marriage proposal, leaving her sister even more annoyed. The Marquis, ignoring his daughter, asks the Duke if he is sure that she is the one he would like to marry, and Ian confirms again. He tries to explain that his family is not doing well financially, and they cannot have her marry at the moment because of the dowry. The Duke says that a dowry will not be necessary. After all, if he has Claire, he needs nothing else. He also informs that the wedding is already scheduled for the following month, that the Marquis doesn't need to worry about anything, thus leaving Claire's father not knowing what to answer and just agreeing. Ian approaches Claire, saying affectionately that he can't wait for them to get married, saying this in front of his family, who are still trying to process everything. A few minutes after the Duke left, Amelia is taking out her anger on Claire and trying to convince her father not to accept this proposal, also saying that she already knew her parents had decided to marry this girl to a disgusting merchant. Even though Claire was already used to this treatment, it still hurt to hear this from her own family. She knew she had to put up with Amelia's tantrum, as it was nothing out of the ordinary. Her father was passive and simply didn't get involved. And her mother, who never once defended her in her life. Claire was sure her mother hated her. The birth had been very difficult, and on top of that, they were expecting a boy. But Claire was a girl. Amelia's birth, on the other hand, was much smoother, and she was a very charming baby, which made her mother give all her affection to her. Her thoughts are interrupted by a strong slap to the face that Amelia gave her, questioning her why it had to be her. 1 month later, the wedding happened as planned, which was good for Claire, because since that day, Amelia's abuses only worsened, and the only thing her mother could do was buy new dresses to calm the spoiled girl's temper. However, the protagonist was satisfied that she managed to endure well and still be presentable on the wedding day, hiding her calloused hands with gloves. After the wedding, Claire lies down in bed, tired from the busy day, and realizes how comfortable that room was compared to what she had in her own house. The Duke enters the room, joking that his wife is quite bold, already in bed. She gets up apologizing and he laughs, saying he was joking and that she can relax. From today onwards, they will be together for 1 year, and she formally says, "Please take care of me. I will do my best to fulfill my duties." She also adds that this year is very important so that her husband can be with the person he loves in the future. And he still jokes, saying that being called husband even makes it seem like they are newly married. The Duke asks her to rest in this bed, and he will sleep in the office. Furthermore, the dress he ordered will probably arrive tomorrow. Clare tries to convince him to stay in the room, saying she would sleep in the study, but Ian doesn't give in until she thanks him and accepts. While trying to sleep, she thinks about why they aren't sleeping together. Probably because sleeping with the person you love must be very good, and she wonders if perhaps one day someone who likes her will appear. The next day, Clare wakes up to someone knocking on her door. As soon as she gets up, a maid says it's already past noon and asks if she would like to sleep more. But Clare says she has rested enough and will get ready. Looking at the few dresses she brought, the maid asks if the rest of her clothes will arrive soon. But Clare explains that this is all she has, and that she doesn't need to worry, as Clare is used to dressing herself. Concerned, the maid asks if the Duchess will wear one of these dresses, and the protagonist asks if there's a problem. Apparently, the former Duchess cared a lot about her appearance and was always impeccable, which seemed strange to the maid. Clare noticed that even though the household staff treated her respectfully, there was still a harsh tone when referring to her, which was understandable after all. A plain woman appeared as the Duke's new wife without prior notice. The butler introduces himself without saying his name. Clare finds this a bit strange, but dismisses it and asks if he could teach her how to manage the duchy. But he refuses and says that she just needs to take care of herself and rest in her room. The protagonist realizes that perhaps this cohabitation won't be so easy, so she decides to explore the mansion and get to know things better, since apparently they won't help her. What she cannot do is do nothing about it, because in her home she lived as a servant doing manual labor, and ended up with calloused hands. Perhaps if she acts a little differently, who knows, she might get the hands of a duchess. While walking through the corridors, Clare hears some maids gossiping about her, commenting on her being a poor noble and totally incompatible with the Duke. In her luggage, she only brought 5 ragged dresses. She probably only plans to steal the Duke's money. The protagonist thinks that if it were her sister, she would have already slapped the maids. However, she will just ignore these insults. Upon arriving in the garden, she notices that everything is very well maintained. Probably the former Duchess took very good care of the mansion. When she met her at the wedding, Ian's mother seemed very busy and had to go to the neighboring country. And because of that, Clare couldn't ask for more details about her new role. While walking and thinking about this, she ends up finding a maid alone, apparently having to wash a large amount of laundry. Upon calling the girl, she gets startled and apologizes for taking so long. The girl, upon turning around, realizes she doesn't know the lady, and the protagonist introduces herself simply as Clare. Introducing herself back as May, she says that the other maids ordered her to wash all these clothes, but she can't manage it. Clare offers to help, and May, not knowing who she is, accepts the help. She teaches that if you step on the clothes during washing, the process becomes faster, and invites May to do it that way. The two have fun while washing the clothes, and the protagonist takes the opportunity to better understand the dynamics of the duchy, asking if Madame Sarn controls who will work on what in the mansion. May says she started working 6 months ago, and the head maid started making her do an absurd amount of laundry every day. When they are about to finish washing the clothes, May gets startled seeing that the Duke is behind Clare, watching everything. He comments that he was looking for Clare and asks what she is doing. Upon turning to answer, Clare slips, but he manages to hold her before she falls to the ground. Back in the chambers after already having received care, Clare apologizes and says she didn't know he would return so soon. Ian comments that he came earlier because the new dresses were arriving, and he ended up coming because of his colleagues who said he needed to stay home like a newlywed does. He asks again what she was doing in the garden. She seemed happy. Embarrassed, she doesn't know what to answer and gets a little worried that he might think she's not good enough to be a duchess. Before she can invent an excuse, the head maid starts scolding her, saying that considering her position as duchess, it would be good to avoid certain behaviors. May interferes, saying it was her fault. The duchess was simply teaching because she wouldn't be able to complete her task on time. Clare is impressed and doesn't understand why that girl would be defending her, especially since they just met. It's the first time someone has been on her side for anything. The protagonist says that what May said is true, but that it's not her fault because she didn't do anything wrong. Questioning further, the head maid asks if the madam washed the clothes, as this is a behavior that stains the dignity of the Duke's family. But Clare is determined to take a stand and says that place is not accessible to anyone from outside, so if everyone stays quiet, there will be no problem at all. The Duke is happy to see his wife taking a stand. She adds that if this story spreads, it means someone in this house is disloyal and unfit to work here, which makes the head maid and the butler agree. Ian says he believes the situation is resolved, but the protagonist comments that there is something else she would like to say. In fact, she spent the whole day walking around the mansion alone as everyone seemed very busy. As the mansion seemed very large and there were many things to do, she asks if she shouldn't try to help. Clare asks the butler who is the person responsible for assigning duties, and he points to Sarna. The protagonist then announces that starting tomorrow, she will be replaced by someone else. Sarn desperately tries to justify herself, but the protagonist asks if she is competent because she put an absurd amount of laundry to be washed by a novice. She explains that the others were supposed to help as soon as they finished their tasks. Clare then says she saw some maids cleaning the hall and they were just gossiping, showing no sign that they would help. Before the discussion worsens, someone announces that the tailor has arrived, and she apologizes to her husband for taking up so much of his time. He smiles and says he is happy to see that he can count on her with the mansion's affairs. As the servants are leaving, Clare asks May to stay, and asks Ian if she can keep May as her personal maid. He even suggests she choose a veteran, but she insists she feels more comfortable with May. Seeing Clare smiling at the decision, the Duke realizes that even though it has only been 3 days since the wedding, she has already shown that she is not passive, and is also very different from what he imagined. On another day in the office, someone calls Ian while he is lost in thought. This is Keith Valona, the king's younger brother. He comments that Ian's face is even glowing from being newly married. Ian asks if by any chance he was making a foolish face. Keith, while sitting on the sofa, says yes and that he shouldn't, as it's just a 1-year marriage contract. But Ian explains that he is not in love. He just finds Clare more interesting than he imagined. Keith says she seemed very quiet on the wedding day. He guesses she was reading a book perhaps, but Ian says he looked for her all over the mansion because he couldn't find her anywhere. Until in the garden, she was washing clothes with the maid, barefoot and holding her dress. The two comment that they have never seen a noblewoman who would do that, while Ian laughs, finding her very impressive. He adds that she also removed Soren from her position. His friend advises him to keep an eye on her so she doesn't run away, and Ian assures him that he will not allow anyone to mess with her. But she is much braver than he expected, which makes Keith interested in meeting this interesting young woman. Back at the mansion. On the day the dresses arrived, Ian explains that he bought some ready-made dresses for now, but the tailor will take her measurements. Ian asks his wife if she would like to have dinner with him to wear her new dress. She feels a little awkward about getting the dress dirty so quickly, but accepts. He waits while his wife changes, and ends up being able to hear the conversation of the two in the next room. Clare asks May to be very careful with the new dresses, especially because it's the first time that she received a new dress. Even though she comes from a marquis family, they were poor. So Clare always used pieces of her mother's and sister's old dresses to make something new for herself. That's why today she is very good at sewing. And the fact that the dress was just for her and brand new made her very happy. Hearing all this, the Duke realizes that she didn't show everything she was feeling when she received the gift. Sometimes it seems like she tries to hide her emotions a little. Poor guy. Only he doesn't realize he's already fallen for her. Ha ha ha. The next day, May apologizes to the Duchess because she bumped into someone and spilled lunch. Unfortunately, there is no other food prepared either. Clare tells her not to worry, since she ate a lot at lunch. She will probably just have tea instead of lunch. However, the protagonist knows very well that due to Sarni's dismissal yesterday, the lack of lunch today is probably some kind of retaliation, but she will not accept them doing this to May as well. Happy because she managed to bring everything, May asks which tea the lady would like. Clare notices that May's eyes are red. It probably wasn't easy for her to bring this tea. She then decides to ask if May would like to have tea with her. May hesitates for a moment but ends up accepting. Upon seeing her maid making tea, the protagonist remembers her childhood memories as a child, of the times she used to drink tea with her grandmother, the only person who ever truly cared about Clare. Insecure about her techniques, May asks if the tea is good, and the protagonist replies yes. Regardless of the taste, she is happy just because the tea was prepared especially for her. Clare is happy that May is such a sweet and kind girl, but she ends up realizing that May also hasn't eaten anything because of her. She suggests they both go for a walk to get a distraction. I didn't understand this suggestion either. It would have been easier to find something to eat, right? But okay. As they walk, Clare is worried about dirtying her new dress, and her maid tells her not to worry since they can wash it later. Very beautiful red roses catch the Duchess's attention, and she is impressed, because Ian's mother loved roses very much, and that's probably why they are so well cared for. Being surrounded by flowers makes Clare forget about herself for a bit, but the thorns of the roses remind her that she is just a substitute, nothing special. A few days later, the situation of missing meals only worsened, mainly because they took advantage of Ian constantly being busy working. Clare was trying to think about how she should react, as they probably wanted to make her give up interfering in the mansion's affairs. And telling her husband wouldn't solve the problem, as he would just fire the person responsible. Besides, constantly bothering her husband over every little thing will worsen other people's impressions of her. May is worried they won't be able to survive without food until they find a solution, and Clare apologizes for putting May in this situation, even though she said it wasn't the Duchess's fault, but her own choice. Breakfast time arrives, and the protagonist is grateful, as it's the time she will be able to eat. The plan is to eat enough to be fine until tomorrow morning, but Clare worries about May because she isn't eating anything. Noticing her hesitation to eat, Ian asks if there's something she didn't like. However, the protagonist is clever and asks if she could take the rest of the food to her room, as she can't eat much in the morning. Her husband agrees and asks the maids to take the food, but obviously Clare refuses and says she will carry it herself. As they walk to Clare's room, the Duke asks if she has already gotten used to the house. She says everything is fine and she especially loved the garden, but she's a bit worried because her husband seems to always be working late. Ian explains a bit awkwardly that when he's focused, he doesn't see time passing. While Clare thinks he doesn't need to appear so apologetic, after all, this is just a contract marriage. She asks him not to pressure himself so much and to rest more. Back in the room, Clare arrives with the bread to offer to May. Obviously, the maid refuses, but her hunger is greater, and the Duchess says she won't be able to eat everything by herself. May ends up accepting the bread. And as May eats the bread emotionally, Clare realizes that even though she is used to this kind of treatment, she needs to do something to help May. During the night, the protagonist comments that she is very hungry, and May apologizes for not being able to bring anything. She remembers that back at her family home, it wasn't rare for her to go a few days without food, all because of the harassment Amelia subjected her to. And since she wouldn't be able to endure long without eating, she secretly decided to cook at midnight. As soon as she remembers this, the protagonist gets excited to solve this problem. She explains to May that she will cook for them. Arriving in the kitchen, suspicious, May still doesn't believe that the madam knows how to cook. Clare reassures her by saying that she has cooked some things before, so she can make something for them now. At least they won't starve. Sometime later, the protagonist is already preparing the stew with some ingredients while May watches suspiciously. She comments that she is impressed that Clare really knows how to cook. And then the Duchess recounts that in her family home, because she went 3 days without eating, she ended up having to make something to survive. So she waited for everyone to sleep, took all the leftover ingredients, and started learning to cook while crying and thinking about what would happen to her if someone found out. May is shocked to learn what Clare went through in her old family and how impressive she is for fighting alone all this time, and comments that she feels ashamed, because after her mother died, she ended up resorting to her noble father, who never looked for her, in order to survive. And that's how she started working at the mansion. Clare says she understands May's fear of being alone and starving, but assures her that as long as they are together, May will eat every day, which is singing while cooking. May gets excited to know this side of her master and also to witness such a beautiful song. Clare comments that she just made up the lyrics to the song, and who knows, one day she might become a singer and live traveling the world. While May asks if the Duke wouldn't be sad if the Duchess left, she is surprised by him entering the kitchen. The protagonist gets scared and turns around to see what happened, but this time she doesn't fall. She just finds the Duke laughing at the scene. Feigning naturalness, she comments that he arrived early today, but inside she's wondering how he always arrives at the worst times. She apologizes for not having gone to greet him, and he asks what she is doing. Commenting that she was just cooking, Ian comments that he could tell by how happy she was. Even so, he questions if there's a cook in the house because she was cooking, and Clare explains that he wasn't present, so she decided to do it herself. The maid tries to lie, saying that they tried to stop her from cooking, but the madam insisted. Counterattacking, Clare apologizes and says she only did it because she hadn't eaten anything since morning, and because she was very hungry, she decided to use the kitchen without permission. The Duke asks why she didn't eat lunch. Feigning innocence, Clare asks if they usually serve lunch in this house. At this moment, it dawns on the handsome man, and he realizes that she is not eating outside of the meals she shares with him, and then he questions the servants, who simply remain silent, not knowing what to answer. Clare interrupts the scolding, saying that the food will get cold and asks if it would be possible to have this conversation after they eat. While eating, the Duke tries to make a good comment about the food, but can only comment that the steak is thick. A little while later, he then comments that the soup tastes very good, but Clare doesn't believe him and says it's okay if he comments that it's tasteless. He comments that everything is very good because she put effort into making it, so she realizes that he probably witnessed almost everything in the kitchen. She gets embarrassed, but he says she seemed to be having fun. The Duke explains that he arrived earlier because his colleagues asked him to return home as soon as possible, and this morning she also seemed worried about him working late, which makes Clare happy, as it will probably now be possible to end this food deprivation. After finishing dinner, the Duke comments on the Duchess's lack of lunch and would like to know who is responsible. They try to lie, saying that the Duchess is the one to blame. She feigns innocence and says that it must probably be true. Since they put so much effort into preparing the food, something she did wrong must have happened. Referring to the servants, she asks what today's menu was, but obviously they cannot answer. Until one of them accuses Annie, another maid, who, according to this girl, was to blame for not feeding the Duchess. When Annie is brought to be punished, she asks if she is being fired, and asking her husband for permission, Clare asks if she could have Annie work exclusively for her. He doesn't quite understand what she intends with this, but accepts after she asks, "Isn't serving someone you hate the worst punishment?" The next day, at the Duke's work, Keith comments that he seems to be in a good mood, and comments that last night he came to drink, but Ian had already gone home. Since he seemed very happy today, Keith was curious to know what happened. The Duke explains that when he arrived home yesterday, Clare was cooking while singing. And as he tells this, he thinks about how magical and delightful that moment remained etched in his memory. His friend comments that his wife is truly different, but cooking? He had never seen a person commit so much to a role that she was even cooking for her fake husband. Ian explains that it wasn't quite that. In fact, he should have noticed earlier, but the servants seemed to be conspiring against her and weren't serving any food. Keith is impressed that even while suffering, she managed to find the strength to overcome it and make her own food. The Duke also comments that since he needs her for this year, he tried to fire the person who was behind it, but incredibly Clare refused and asked for the person responsible to work directly for her. And even after they talked, Claire just said that the maid is probably too loyal to the family to have done that out of concern, so it would be a waste to fire someone like that. Your wife is truly fascinating, Keith comments while the Duke agrees. Thinking that he initially found Claire a bit strange and he had only proposed marriage because she was the best candidate, but after they got married, his impression of her has been changing. She washes clothes with a smile on her face, cooks while singing. The only thing he can't understand is that sometimes she puts on a smile that makes it seem like she has just closed herself off from the world. Keith asks when he will introduce this incredible person to him and the others. Ian comments that since her dress has arrived, probably at the next banquet. As soon as he arrives home, Claire is there to greet him, looking like a true wife. The poor guy's heart won't be able to take it, folks. He's even speechless. But he recovers and informs her that he arrived early again, besides asking her if she could go to a banquet with him in 2 weeks. While holding his coat, she accepts the invitation and says it will be her first public duty as a wife. However, the truth is that Claire is quite nervous about it because it's an important social event with the other nobles. So much so that she ends up not being able to sleep, thinking about how she'll manage since she doesn't know how to dance. It will be her first banquet as Duchess. She definitely needs to dance. Perhaps it would be better to hire a teacher, but when Amelia went to learn, it took 2 years to get a teacher. And since dancing requires 2 people and it can't be with another woman, Claire honestly doesn't know what to do. The next morning, the Duke bids farewell to the protagonist going to work, while she thinks about how she will manage to find a dance partner in less than 15 days. On her way back to the room, she notices the maid carrying the clothes Ian wore yesterday, and asks the maid to give the clothes to her. Since the Duke is a stylish person who always wears different clothes, he probably won't notice that one of his outfits is missing. So she finishes a sheet doll with the Duke's clothes. This is her new dance partner. As she hugs the doll, she feels something in its front pocket, and realizes there was a very beautiful and old pen that he probably forgot. While placing the pen on the table, she thinks she'll probably return it to him later, since now she has to start her dance lessons. She tries to remember what she saw from Amelia's lesson and follow the rhythm of the birds chirping. Without knowing how to keep the rhythm or if she's doing it right or not, Claire enjoys herself while dancing with the doll. Again, the timing is bad, and the Duke enters the room, calling her. Because of the pen, he'd forgotten his clothes. She pretends she wasn't dancing with a doll and turns to pick up the pen. Obviously, she slips again. The Duke runs to help her, and they both fall to the floor. Ian asks if he can know exactly what's happening, and the poor girl freaks out because she's been in his lap this whole time. She moves away and asks if he got hurt, and he says no. After all, he trains a lot, so that wasn't very difficult. The Duke explains that he came back because he had forgotten his pen. She explains that when she picked up the clothes, she found the pen and was going to return it to him at night. Embarrassed, she replies that since he invited her to the banquet, she was ashamed to say she had never danced before and decided to practice. The Duke is impressed to learn that even though she participated in several social events, Claire had never been invited to dance before, nor had she taken lessons at home. The Duke says that they will probably invite her to dance, but even if she rejects everyone, she still needs to dance one dance with him. And Claire explains that this is precisely why she made this doll to practice. She gets worried because perhaps, knowing she doesn't know how to dance, her husband might want to cancel the contract. However, he stands up and says she doesn't need to worry about it as he will teach her to dance. Claire worries about how he will manage to teach her, given that he is always so busy. He tells her not to worry as they can practice an hour a day before breakfast. This is good because they already need to get in sync for the upcoming events of the year, promising then to start the lessons tomorrow. He thanks Claire for keeping his pen and says he will go back to work. After he leaves, she feels embarrassed that he saw her again in an awkward moment. Arguing with the dummy, she says it's his fault for making her feel this embarrassed. And as she hugs the dummy, she smells the Duke on the clothes while blushing. Later in Claire's room, she calls the maids to prepare tea in the garden so she can look at the roses. Annie, now working personally for Claire, is always very cold, but she does her job correctly. And it's even good that she doesn't get too attached to the house staff, as she will only be staying for a year. As the protagonist walks through the rose garden, she realizes how privileged she is to be able to drink tea in such a beautiful place. She remembers that she put her dance partner in the closet to avoid any problems with someone discovering it, but her thoughts are interrupted by a scream. Annie is reprimanding May for making the tea incorrectly. To try and defuse the situation, Claire asks May to go get some appetizers to eat with the tea. Leaving the two alone, Claire comments that Annie was a bit cruel, however. The maid tries to explain coldly why she acted that way. And finally, Claire understands that Annie acts cold. But clearly she was concerned with helping and teaching May, who was still a novice, and not because she wanted to mistreat her, but because she cares about her. Even so, she tells Annie that even if she hates her, please continue to educate and teach May. Because that way May will certainly be a much better person and maid since Annie is cold, but very good at her job, and even when the protagonist leaves, the two maids will be fine. Changing the subject, Claire asks Annie where she can buy makeup, but the maid is shocked that the madam never used makeup before the wedding. The protagonist explains that she saw no need to use it and always went barefaced to parties. However, the truth is that it was Amelia who made her believe that it wouldn't make a difference whether she wore makeup or not. Annie says she will probably need to buy a whole makeup set. and Claire is a little worried about having to buy everything, probably having to ask her husband for permission first, but the maid explains that there's no need after all. The Duke didn't leave any shopping restrictions for the Duchess. She then asks if Claire needs anything else. Even though the Duchess replies that she doesn't think so, Annie proposes to take a look at her belongings to make sure nothing else is missing. But before she goes, she questions if Claire is comfortable letting someone who bullied her look at her belongings. Of course, Claire replies that it's no problem, especially because someone who was betrayed so quickly by her friends wouldn't try to do anything to the person who accepted her. Sometime later, May returns and asks where Annie is. The Duchess replies that she asked her to prepare things for the ball, so she went to check if anything else was needed. She remembers that she cannot do things wrong, especially because her husband prepared a dress just for her. So she needs to train more. Maybe tomorrow, after training with the Duke, she might train a bit with the dummy. At this moment, she remembers that she asked Annie to check her things, so she will probably find the dummy embarrassed. She runs to prevent Annie from finding it, but it's too late, and the maid wonders what that is in her wardrobe. May, upon seeing the dummy, asks if those aren't the clothes the Duke was wearing yesterday, while Claire, dying of embarrassment, can't say anything. Since she didn't explain the situation, the two maids believe the dummy is a way to miss the Duke, which makes things more embarrassing, but she ends up not being able to explain that it's for dance practice at the palace training ground. The Duke, hot, trains and shows his defined abs while wiping his sweat. He remembers joining the Order of Knights when he was only 18 years old. After that, his efforts were recognized, and he became the Crown Prince's Royal Guard Knight. Even after receiving the title of Duke, he continued to serve as a Royal Guard, but he didn't feel he was playing an exceptional role in either place, and that's why he ended up leaving the Royal Guard at 22. But even so, training on days he can't focus is still very good, Keith calls him. Impressed that the Duke is training so early, and he says that he only went there to train because he found out that Ian was there, since lately he has cool and interesting things to share. The Duke turns around and says he has nothing to tell, but Keith says maybe he'd feel better telling someone than training. After a while, Ian gives in and ends up saying it's about Clare again. Keith asks if they happened to fight. He says no and tells that he actually ended up seeing her with a doll. It was really just any doll made with sheets and clothes. Ian explains that he ended up returning right after leaving for work, as he had forgotten his pen and his clothes from the day before, and when he questioned the maid, she said that the madam had taken it. When he arrived in the room, Claire was dancing with a doll wearing my clothes. It was the first time he saw a woman dancing so happily. Keith questions why she would be dancing with a doll, given that his sister always dances with several men at parties. Ian says he also found it strange, but he realized that they were probably raised very differently, since he hadn't deeply investigated her life to avoid getting too attached. He didn't know these things. His friend says he didn't imagine she was that interesting. Maybe she's more charming than the woman who played with his feelings for 10 years. He still continues saying that Ian probably just didn't have anyone else to love and ended up getting attached to a woman for 10 years who has probably already forgotten him and is enjoying life. This makes the Duke think. His beloved is named Sophia, the princess of the nation. They were friends since childhood, and over time she became someone he loved. He thought they were destined to be together one day. However, as Sophia was very curious, at 14 years old, she started traveling the world under the pretext of studying, and in this way the years passed until now the king ordered her to return in at most 1 year. Continuing to poke the wound, his friend says it's time to face the reality that he's probably clinging to something that doesn't exist. The next day, after breakfast, the two began dance lessons, which don't seem to be going very well. Claire is sure she was born without the gift of dancing, and probably her husband didn't have this problem when he learned, since she can't imagine him being bad at anything. He tells her that she's too worried about where her foot will land. She just has to feel the flow. However, Claire says she doesn't want to step on his foot, but Ian says there's a good side to stepping on a man's foot. That way, men who don't want their feet stepped on won't ask her to dance. She says that if it doesn't get better, her husband will suffer for a year, and he says it's no problem since he can endure it, so she doesn't need to worry about him. Even so, Claire is worried about causing too many problems, especially since she's not the definitive wife. A few days ago, Annie charged the Duke for several items that the Duchess was lacking, such as dresses, shoes, accessories, etc., making him have to buy all the items. Clearly, the Duke bought everything quickly and delivered it to their room. He says that even if Annie hadn't pointed it out, he would have been upset to know that he neglected his wife, and also comments that she has a very good critical eye for people, as the two maids she placed near her are very good and loyal. They decide to go back to dance practice, and noticing that she started looking at her feet again, he decides to teach her in a different way. Holding her chin, he asks her to practice dancing while looking into each other's eyes and talking. The poor girl's little heart can't handle so much beauty, and the handsome one still pretends he doesn't know how he affects her. Starting to practice the dance, Claire asks what they could talk about, and the Duke explains that it's normal for partners to have small talk while dancing. He then asks if she has gotten used to life in the mansion and apologizes for not having noticed about the food issue before. Claire affirms that it's fine, as it was her choice not to tell him. Even so, he worries that she suffered, but Claire says she's used to going hungry, which clearly worsens the situation, leaving him worried and disguising it. Claire says it was due to her parents' financial situation. avoiding talking about what she went through at her family's house, precisely because she didn't want him to feel sorry for her. Changing the subject, she asks him to talk more about himself, since they had already talked a lot about her. However, she touches on a complicated topic by asking what kind of woman the person he loves was. An awkward atmosphere settles between the two. Claire, realizing that he also has things he wouldn't want to share, makes her change the subject again, but he says it's okay. Ian says that Sophia is 1 year younger than him, but she has a challenging personality that she probably would have enjoyed much more if she had been born a man. Due to his family's status and age, Ian was probably the only man good enough for her, which is why they have been engaged since childhood. Claire comments that they were probably a perfect match since they were little, and is impressed when he says he has been waiting 10 years for her. Upon questioning if that's strange, the Duke comments that, as his friend said, maybe he just hadn't found the right person until now. He's already falling for our protagonist, isn't he? Hehehe. Ending the subject, Ian apologizes for making her listen to such a silly story, and especially for involving her in it, even though these apologies sound strange after they are already married because of this. But Claire cuts him off before he finishes, saying that it was her choice. She ends up telling her story of not being raised with parental love, often going hungry, doing servants' chores, and other things. The Duke, astonished, asks if she went through all that alone, and if her sister also went through it. The protagonist says that her sister was raised differently. She was the one their parents liked more, and everything was given to her, even when they couldn't afford it. That's why Claire explains that she never dreamed of a happy marriage, as she knew. That one day she would be sent to marry a greedy merchant or someone probably much older than her, as these were the only two options. But before she can finish the sentence, the blister on her foot starts to hurt. She ends up stumbling and falls into our dear Ian's lap. It's at this moment that Claire realizes her heart beats faster for him. She composes herself and finishes the story she started by saying, "I wasn't in a position to hope for a happy marriage. That's why no matter what anyone says, to me, you are a hero." These words hit him right in the heart. Without realizing it, he starts to blush. Claire gets worried, thinking he's unwell, even though he says he's fine. She panics and says she will call the doctor as soon as possible since his ears, face, and neck are red. Hiding his face, he tries to ask her to calm down, saying it's nothing. But it's too late because she runs off to find the doctor. After the doctor examines him, he confirms there's nothing wrong. He bids farewell to his wife and goes to work. Meanwhile, the crazy girl argues with the doll, now in new clothes changed by the maids, thinking the doll is a comfort. Thinking her husband is hiding that he's tired, she sees the paperwork of things she needs to check for the mansion that were left by the butler, and quickly returns to work. Sometime later, someone knocks on the bedroom door. She asks them to come in, wondering who it could be. The kitchen chef appears at the door holding something. He hands her a large tray of cupcake-like muffins, saying it was an apology for what happened. However, everyone clearly knows that noble women value elegance and visual beauty, so delivering a plain and undecorated muffin? Claire thinks it might be exactly for her, since her sister always mocked her for never having tasted a noble sweet. The good smell of the muffins ends up disrupting her thoughts, and she decides to try one. To her surprise, they are extremely delicious, and she offers them to the two maids, telling them that the head chef made this whole batch as an apology. While May is impressed by the quantity and good smell, Annie is worried if it's okay for the young lady to accept this kind of gift, clearly sensing the bad intention behind a plain and inelegant sweet, but Claire says it's fine, as he has been preparing meals correctly since that day. Worried about having too many muffins and them not being able to eat them all, Annie suggests the Duchess take some to her husband at work. It will be a great excuse to visit him and check if he's okay, which makes Claire excited to go. Even worried about being a hindrance, she decides to go. Already in the carriage on the way, Claire starts to get a little nervous about going alone as she refused to bother her busy maids. She worries about how she will present herself to his co-workers so as not to appear to be just a temporary duchess. As soon as they arrive at the palace gate, the coachman replies that he will not wait for her and that she should inform the Duke to arrange another carriage. How presumptuous. Even before she can reply, the presumptuous man leaves. Claire approaches the guard at the gate to enter, asking for permission and informing him that she is from the Duchy of Eder and has something to deliver to her husband. Judging her out of the corner of his eye, the guard asks for her entry permit, but the protagonist had no idea that she would need something to enter. He further adds, saying that without an entry permit or a royal order, it is not allowed to enter, and still asks with disdain if she hadn't heard about it from the Duke. Claire explains that she came without warning and asks if by any chance the guard could deliver this basket to the Duke, but to her surprise, he refuses, saying that he cannot accept any item, especially for Duke Ian, since he receives gifts every day. The guards have been instructed to reject all of them. The guard comments that it's the first time a Duke's fan calls herself his wife. They have used pretexts like relatives, but wife is the first time. Claire replies that she really is the true wife, but the guard says that this can only be a joke. The Duchess of Eder is known for being incredibly dull and unremarkable. And you, miss, he continues, are very beautiful. Anyone can see that you are not like the rumors. The protagonist just smiles. After all, it seems that with the new clothes, she no longer looks so dull. However, if she doesn't find the Duke, she won't be able to leave. The carriage ride is 40 minutes. Walking back to the mansion is somewhat surreal. She then asks the guard if it would be a problem to wait for him there at the gate. He says no, but that it will probably be useless. Claire stays in the corner, standing and waiting. An hour and a half has passed since she arrived, but unfortunately, he still hasn't appeared. The guard is surprised that she is still waiting. He says he didn't expect that she would stay there so long. Even after he returned from his break and among the Duke's fans, she is being the most persistent. The guard explains that fans usually try hard, but since the Duke is in his honeymoon phase, maybe it's better to give up. He wouldn't betray so soon after marrying. And even if it's not possible now, maybe you'll have a chance in a while. To top it off, the guard continues talking nonsense and says that the Duke's marriage seems to be a contract marriage and that he will probably divorce in a year. Since the Duchess of Ader is known for being strange in high society, everyone found it strange when he chose her. That's why the rumors are that the Duke was blackmailed by Marquis Maurice to pay the family debt. After hearing all this, the poor thing is only relieved that the rumor isn't that the Duke hates her. Not satisfied, he still continues saying that everyone found it strange, because even though the Duke is a former knight, he never introduced his wife to others. Claire asks if that's strange, and the guard explains that it's a tradition. If a man loves his wife, he will want to show her to everyone. And he still says that if it were him, he would want to introduce her to all the guards who train with him since they are like family. Concluding, he says, it's probably a contract marriage, so he's embarrassed to let people see her. Oh, how pitiful. But the guard replies that she really acts like a duchess and that probably any knight would line up to escort her. She says that she doesn't know if she should be happy or sad to hear that. However, suddenly the guard changes his posture, becoming alert and greeting His Majesty Keith. Claire notices the prince's beautiful golden eyes and remembers that she had seen him somewhere before. The guard introduces the lady to the prince and realizes that he didn't know her name until now. Hesitantly, she replies that her name is Clare Maurice. Or rather, after the marriage, it's now Clare Eder. The prince says that's why she seems so familiar while the guard is paralyzed in shock. He introduces himself as Keith, Ian's friend and the king's younger brother. The protagonist remembers that they met on the wedding day. She is surprised that he is there. After all, there is a gate only for royalty, and he comments that he came to see because he heard there was a woman saying she was Ian's wife at the gate. However, he didn't imagine it was actually his wife and asks if she forgot her entry permit. The protagonist says she seems to have forgotten, even though she had no idea she needed one. And the prince says he will take her to Ian, and that she doesn't need to worry about the past since this place is practically his home. The guard finally says something and asks if she really is the Duke's wife, which the prince confirms, and Claire feels a bit awkward. Quickly, the guard apologizes for being so inconvenient and saying a lot of things he shouldn't have. Claire says that most of what he said was true, and she also didn't have a pass, so he doesn't need to worry, and even offers a cupcake as a reward for him keeping her company during that time. The prince can't stop laughing at how unique Claire truly is, and she doesn't understand the reason for his laughter. She bids farewell to the guard and wishes him a good day at work. Already inside the palace, the prince comments that he can't believe he got to meet her before the banquet, and she replies that she was happy to meet him today, especially because he saved her from rotting away at the gate. The protagonist knows that the king's younger brother is one of the Duke's best friends, so she intends to maintain good terms with him. Her husband and the prince are the most promising young nobles in high society. Even someone like her, who doesn't listen to gossip, knows them. Unlike her husband, His Majesty is involved in several romance rumors. But perhaps because he chose his partners correctly, it never turned into a scandal. Keith says he heard a lot about her through the Duke and that she can speak formally with him, which Claire refuses, as it would be rude since he is royalty. The prince comments that it's no problem since she will be the Duchess for a year. This makes her wonder if the prince knows about the agreement or if it's just rumors like the guard. So she asks him if he also thinks they will divorce in a year, and that the guard commented the same thing. Even though she expected this reaction from people, it still hurts to hear it. Keith comments that if they divorce, he will help her. She asks if he would give her a job if she were abandoned. While laughing, the prince says it wasn't exactly that kind of help, but he heard she can cook and wash clothes. At that moment, she realizes that the prince probably knows everything about the two of them and the contract. She comments that he is really very close to her husband. Keith says they have been friends for 20 years and Ian tells him everything, so if she wants to keep something private. Before he finishes, Claire comments that she envies the prince, as she has no one she can talk to so freely. And Keith can only be impressed that she is truly amazing, since she doesn't even get angry that her husband is telling everything to someone else. Her husband is in his office working, thinking about how much Claire has improved in dancing, which is a good thing, but he will miss seeing her face all apologetic for stepping on his foot. A colleague enters the room saying he knocked on the door, but since the Duke didn't answer, he came in and hands over a report about Clare Maurice. His colleague questions him why he is investigating more about Claire, given that he had already seen about the Morris household before. Ever since he heard things about Claire, he became concerned about how she was raised, as she never learned to dance. She was probably mistreated at home. The only person who took care of Claire was her grandmother, but she passed away when Claire was only 10 years old. The colleague says he heard a rumor. It seems there's a lady claiming to be Duke Ian's wife at the front gate. It's impressive that even after the marriage, he remains famous. Ian thinks he would really like to introduce Claire to his colleagues to avoid situations like this. But since she would never come to his workplace to protect the fact that it's a fake marriage, this won't be possible. As his colleague is leaving the office, he runs into Keith, who is already entering the room, saying he has a special delivery. Claire appears behind the prince, apologizing for the intrusion. He didn't expect this, especially since he had just thought she wouldn't show up there. Keith comments, "What kind of expression is that? Ian should be happy his wife came to see him." She says she only came to deliver some sweets to him and that she's leaving now. Ian comments that it was probably heavy. She should have asked someone to carry it for her. Little did he know she had waited outside for 2 hours. He thanks her, saying it was good because it's already time for everyone to take a break so they can eat. The colleague introduces himself, saying it's a pleasure to meet her. Claire returned the greeting and thanked him for taking care of her husband, which leaves both of them impressed by her beauty and elegance. Quickly, the colleague takes the basket from Ian's hand and says he will distribute it to the others. Taking the opportunity, he pulls the prince to go along, leaving the couple alone. Before they leave, Claire thanks His Highness for the help and says it was a pleasure to talk with him. Now alone in the room, the protagonist apologizes for showing up unannounced. Ian says it's no problem, as he wasn't that busy, and asks if it's true that she waited at the gate. He apologizes for not realizing she waited so long and says he will arrange an entry permit for her as soon as possible. Claire says it's all right, that thanks to the prince, she managed to deliver the sweets in the end. Seeing Claire try to explain why she came, Ian realizes something. That ever since they started practicing dancing, she has been showing various expressions. Unlike when they first met, when she was very shy and quiet. Claire comments that the cupcakes were very good. She had never eaten anything so good before. And Ian says that if she wants, he can ask for them to be made every day. However, she refuses, saying it's too much work and that she wouldn't even be able to eat all of it. The Duke says there's a sweet shop his mother really likes, and he would like to take Claire there to see it. He starts to imagine how good it will be to see Claire's expression light up seeing all those sweets and cakes. As he is lost in his thoughts, the protagonist starts to think that perhaps he is embarrassed to say he was busy, and worries if coming to his workplace was a problem. Since he is very kind, even if she asked, he would say it was no problem. He ends up interrupting her thoughts and asks if she would mind him introducing her to everyone. She says no, that it would be a pleasure to meet everyone. The Duke stands up and extends his hand to her, inviting her to go. In the room with all his colleagues, Ian introduces Claire to them as his wife, and she greets them and thanks everyone for taking such good care of her husband. Everyone is impressed. She looks nothing like the rumors. They thank her for bringing the sweets and say they were delicious. One of them comments that since the Duchess came all the way here to see her husband, they should spend some time together after work, and comments that Ian spent some time in the infirmary this morning, which worries Claire. Without thinking, she approaches him to check if he has a fever or something. When she realizes she ended up being a bit invasive, she quickly steps back and says she was just worried. Realizing they are being a third wheel, one of them says that since she came because she was worried about her husband, they should enjoy their time together. Ian, embarrassed, asks if she was really worried about him. Agreeing, Claire explains that it was because he didn't seem very well this morning. He then apologizes for making her worried and waiting to see him. Oh my god, just kiss already. That's exactly what everyone thought, ha ha ha. In the protagonist's head, she's imagining that he's only acting this way with her because they are in front of other people. As they head towards the palace exit, Claire comments that she enjoyed meeting Ian's colleagues. Everyone is very friendly. He asks where she left the carriage, and when she replies that the guy dropped her off and left, he becomes a little apprehensive after all. He always comes by horse, and everyone knows that. Claire tries to say that it probably wasn't the young man's intention. She changes the subject, asking where they are going, and Ian explains that he doesn't usually use the main gate. And then she comments that the gate guard said there are still many women who come trying to see him and bringing gifts. Ian pretends not to notice and says that next time he will make sure everyone knows she doesn't need an entry permit, which makes Claire happy because it means she can visit him again. Thus, she realizes how kind he is to her, even though it's just a temporary relationship. The feeling of happiness and relief is impressive. In the royal carriage, the protagonist asks if it's really no problem to use the royal carriage, and Ian assures her it's not, since the carriage belongs to his best friend. Putting that aside, she thanks him for arranging a carriage, since she had never ridden a horse before and was afraid. He says that if she wants, one day he can teach her, and comments that when they get home, he will talk to the servants because the coachman left her behind and also because of the cupcakes. However, Claire tells Ian to just report the incident and not to inflict drastic punishments on his servants for the sake of the future, while he insists on punishing them. She can only think that it's impressive how angry he gets for someone who is just a substitute wife. Upon arriving at the mansion, everyone is waiting, and Claire takes the initiative, asking for the person responsible for making the sweets today to be called. After the head chef arrives, she then asks if he has any idea why he was called. He tries to apologize, saying he believes she liked simple sweets and therefore prepared them without meaning anything bad, but she hadn't even commented anything. Claire wonders why he went to all the trouble to make a plain sweet when he is clearly feeling guilty. Does he like to belittle her that much? Or is it just a reason to ally with others by having a common enemy? Then the Duchess says he is mistaken after all. She called him to thank him, but before he could process what she said, he already starts apologizing, until he realizes what she actually said. Clare explains that the sweets were appreciated by everyone, and she believes that's why he made so many, so she could share them with others, right? Besides, the fact that they had no frosting made it easier for everyone to eat during work, and it even makes the Duke himself agree with her. She asks what the Duke could do to reward the head chef, and he comments that in the Eater family, a salary bonus is usually given for any good deed. Clare thanks the chef and tells him to continue setting an example for others. While grabbing the Duke's arm, she says he should rest so he doesn't get another fever. I no longer know if she is pretending or really flirting with him. Inside the mansion, the Duke seems satisfied with something, and Clare asks what happened. He says he didn't expect her to praise the head chef that way. Her actions always surprise him. However, he wants to understand why she decided to do that in front of everyone, even knowing that the head chef's intentions were bad. The Duchess explains that she only rewarded him for the result of the sweets, and not for the intention behind making them, which worries her husband because sometimes Clare says things as if it doesn't concern you. He adds that even though he asked her to play the role of Duchess, he doesn't want her to suffer, and if for any reason she is in trouble, she should let him know as soon as possible. Happily, she agrees and says he should rest, as that's why they returned home early. Before she leaves, Ian calls her to hand her a jar, explaining that it's a cream for calloused hands. He informs her that he brought enough for her to use for a long time, and says he will take a bath to rest as she requested. In the other room, the maids ask what Clare is looking at so lovingly. She explains that it's a hand cream that her husband gave her. Clare knows that her calloused hands are a problem, especially since it's not normal for a Duchess. He was probably worried about it, and that's why he bought so much cream, while May says he probably loves the Duchess very much. For the protagonist, receiving this cream is like showing that he cares about her and wants her to perform her role as Duchess in the best possible way. She then convinces her two maids to help her apply the cream every day, because that way they will also be applying it to their own hands. Since she cares about their hands just as her husband cares about hers, that's why she insists that both of them apply it every day. Even after trying to refuse a few times, they realize that the Duchess will not change her mind and decide to just give in and help the protagonist apply the cream, besides saying that from now on either Annie or May will accompany the Duchess outside the mansion so that what happened today doesn't repeat itself. Annie also tells Clare that she should wear the party shoes a few times a day, thus making them more comfortable for the day. May comments that the two of them will probably look beautiful dancing together. That said, Annie advises the Duchess that now that she is taking care of her hands, it might be important to start taking care of her whole body. Clare refuses, saying it's too much for her to do, and perhaps it would be better to only use it on the day of the banquet. But Annie explains that beauty is not made in a day, and so she just has to trust that in the end, she will have an incredible result. On the night of the banquet, a beautiful blue dress is ready and waiting to be worn by its owner. Due to nervousness, Clare spent the entire night looking at the dress and didn't sleep at all. In the past, her sister always took the best dresses, and because of that, everyone laughed at Clare during events. The maids ask if everything is all right, as the Duchess seems to be spacing out more often than usual. In fact, she has no idea what would look good or not, and wonders how Amelia managed to give orders and look beautiful for the banquets. Clare decides to ask for makeup like a picture frame, which leaves Annie a little confused, not understanding the connection between makeup and a picture frame. The Duchess explains that her husband is the most handsome man in the kingdom, and if she is going to be by his side, she cannot simply steal attention, but rather compliment the art like a frame. Annie says she understands what the Duchess means and will do her best to make her beautiful. Sometime later, May appears, crying with the shoe completely ruined in her hands. She apologizes, but truly doesn't know how it happened. May asks if they should look for the culprit, but the Duchess says it's no problem since that wouldn't solve the issue. She asks if there is another shoe to wear, and it seems only a new blue one is left. However, since she only wore this shoe once, it's very tight on her foot. Clare simply says it's perfect and that she will use those very shoes for the banquet. Annie tells the Duchess not to worry, as she will find out during the banquet who did this. Clare agrees, as destroying other people's things is truly very wrong. The preparations finally finish, and the Duchess looked very beautiful with makeup and the new dress. May compliments her beauty and says that today the Duchess is more beautiful than ever, which the protagonist thanks, even if it's just flattery. The Duke knocks on the door, asking if she is ready, and before they say goodbye, Annie tells her to trust that the two of them weren't just flattering her. Just look at her husband's reaction when she sees him. As soon as Clare sees how handsome the Duke is, she is speechless. It's truly very difficult for anyone to stand out next to him. She finally understood why all those noble women were obsessed with him, and she even wonders if she would be allowed to walk beside someone like that. She says it's the first time she's dressed up so much in her life, which makes her a little embarrassed. Our dear protagonist says she is beautiful, and for a moment he was speechless. But of course, she doesn't believe him and thinks he's acting to show the maids what a good husband he is. She says it's a bit strange to receive direct compliments like that, and he insists that she truly looked very beautiful in that dress. Returning the compliment, Clare says he also looks handsome, like a noble prince straight out of a painting. Annie reinforces that now the lady should believe they weren't just flattering her. And so, the two leave for the party. As soon as they arrive, everyone notices the couple's beauty. Clare can perceive the fixed gazes on them, but she believes that this is probably due to her husband's beauty. And for some reason, just the fact that he is her partner gives her a sense of security. The Duke comments that everyone is looking at her. Of course, she insists, saying no, the gazes are because of Ian's beauty. And he comments that she is very oblivious when it comes to herself. She says she's actually very nervous and afraid of even forgetting how to greet people. The Duke then suggests they deal with the most difficult part first, which is to introduce herself to everyone as the Duchess of Eder. He finds it cute how determined she is, but gently asks her to calm down and enjoy the banquet, especially for her to stop squeezing her hand so much. She'll end up hurting herself. Trying to ease his wife's tension, Ian says that the first time he debuted in society, he was also very nervous. He was so tense that he was walking while swinging the same arm and the same leg like a robot. This makes the protagonist laugh just imagining the scene. Ian comments that she finally seems more relaxed. The first guest approaches the couple, asking permission to introduce themselves. This is the party hostess, Countess Boyle, and also a friend of Ian's mother. Both thank her for the invitation. Clare introduces herself elegantly, and the Countess comments that she can't even believe that little Ian already has a partner. She comments that their wedding was very beautiful and starts talking about moments from when Ian was little. This pleases Clare, as listening to stories from Ian's childhood is like getting to know a new side of him. The Countess comments that Ian has been very stubborn since he was little, and when he sets his mind on something, it's very difficult to change his mind. The first thing that comes to Clare's mind is that he really is like that. The way he holds on to one person so dearly, or how he hides when he's unwell and won't complain. She also comments that even so, the Duchess doesn't hate him, because his beauty allows him to get away with many things. Ian tells her to stop embarrassing him in front of his wife. Clare had attended several events before, but this was the first time she felt so welcomed. Even casual conversations like these fill her heart with warmth. The Countess apologizes for holding them for so long, and invites Clare to a tea party next time. Obviously, she had never been to one before, and remembers that her sister always boasted about going, while Clare stayed home cleaning the floor and doing other chores. However, she wonders what they usually talk about at tea parties. Probably love stories. Ian notices she is distracted and asks if everything is all right. She says yes. She's just struggling to stay calm and keep her heart inside her chest, and that just being by the Duke's side attracts a lot of attention. The Countess says that Ian has indeed always attracted attention wherever he went. However, she comments that Clare is not losing anything by his side. Everyone is really looking at them both. The protagonist says it's just because of her husband, but the Countess comments that several men are also appreciating her beauty. Clare worries if she is bothering people with her presence, which makes the Countess realize how oblivious the Duchess is. Ian comments that as her husband, he is more comfortable with her not noticing the gazes. The Countess replies that being modest is good, but Clare also needs to be more confident and says that everyone is stunned because she looks so beautiful tonight. The humble protagonist replies that if she isn't embarrassing her husband, that's already enough. The Countess says goodbye and asks them to enjoy the night. Ian invites Clare to get something to eat. However, as soon as they start walking, someone calls out to him. Several couples want to introduce themselves to the Duke and Duchess, precisely because they came to the party with the purpose of forming ties with the Duchy of Eder. Clare thinks she ended up receiving more compliments than expected, but she won't get the wrong idea, as the compliments are all thanks to the Eder family. After some time of conversation and introductions, Ian, already tired, says that they probably should have held a smaller banquet. Clare comments that it's the first time she truly feels how powerful the House of Eder is. Seeing that there are still many couples who want to introduce themselves, Ian thinks of an idea to avoid more introductions. Extending his hand towards Clare, he invites her to a dance, which she accepts with pleasure. As they dance, Clare notices that the gazes are sharp, but it's completely different from the ones she used to receive. Social events were just something she had to attend and silently endure, but now she never imagined she would be dancing so proudly. During the dance, she notices they are right in the middle of the hall, and remembers having noticed that the Duke for some reason always dances right in the center. She asks if there's any reason he does that. Ian explains that there isn't a specific reason, but it's because the center is always empty, and if the hall is too crowded at the edges, you always have to be careful not to bump into others. Changing the subject, he comments that Clare's dancing has improved a lot, and she says it's all thanks to her excellent teacher. Smiling, Clare can only think about how all of this seems like a dream. If she didn't know he has someone he loves, she probably would have been swept away like the other young ladies. However, she knows her place, and that this will only last for 1 year. Dancing with another young man sometime later, Clare ends up stepping on his foot. He asks if she isn't very good at dancing, which leaves her a bit embarrassed. After all, after she tried dancing with other men, it wasn't working out. For some reason, the dance she thought she had mastered only works with her husband. The young man thanks her for the dance and says how lucky Duke Eder is to marry someone like Clare. Obviously, she responds humbly, not believing the compliment. After a few dances, Clare's foot starts to hurt a lot because of the new shoes. Her wish was to be able to take off her shoes and go barefoot, but her dress isn't long enough for that. Keith spots the Duchess and greets her. She returns the greeting, and he comments again that she doesn't need to be so formal, commenting that the food and drink are very good and Clare should try them. She mentions that she doesn't like red wine. He says he will remember that, as he used to always bring wine to the Duke when he visited him. Placing his glass on the bandage, he says that next time he will bring something different that she might also like. And then he invites her for a dance. Clare hesitates a little. After all, her foot is not in the best condition, but it would be rude for her to reject a request from His Majesty. They then walk to the hall to begin the dance. But our dear Ian appears to save her, saying that unfortunately the dance will have to wait for another day. As they are leaving, Ian says he started feeling a bit unwell and has a headache. Clare runs towards him to check if he has a fever. I'm already thinking she's doing this on purpose just to enjoy the moment, hahaha. She turns to the prince, apologizing and promising to dance with him on a next occasion. Kissing her hand, he thanks her and says he will see her soon. Seriously, if Ian doesn't make a move soon, I'm in favor of Clare getting together with the handsome prince. On the way to the carriage, Ian apologizes for having called her to leave earlier. Clare replies that she had enough fun and the Duke's health is more important. Ian says it's a good thing he managed to get her out of there and apologizes, saying it was just a lie that he was feeling unwell. Not understanding anything, the protagonist asks why he lied and if he is really okay. He then says he did it because he noticed her foot was hurting since she was walking differently than usual. Clare tries to convince him that they should go back. It makes no sense for them to leave because of her. Suddenly, he places his hand behind her waist. He picks her up and says he is worried about her. She asks him to put her down, dying of embarrassment, but he says no because she is walking strangely. He then says that if she is too embarrassed, she just needs to close her eyes. This is the ideal moment for a kiss. Someone push? Since no kiss happened, let's continue. He invites her to continue their lessons tomorrow, and even though she says she doesn't want to take up his precious time, he replies that she doesn't have to worry since he is looking forward to it. The walk to the carriage continues, which seems like an eternity. Ian comments that they should talk more privately without all the servants watching. Clare agrees, saying that they really have good conversations while dancing, and the two lovebirds finally reach the carriage. During the way back, Clare apologizes again for not being able to endure until the end. Ian says she doesn't need to apologize. After all, it was he who called her to leave, and he had also already talked to everyone he needed to. During the event, he realized that Clare fulfilled her role as Duchess better than he had imagined. He is probably not the only one who is surprised by how different she is from what she appeared to be. He asks if her foot is very sore, and how this happened even after she had worn the shoe a lot so it wouldn't hurt on the day. The Duchess says that an unforeseen event happened in the morning and her shoe was damaged. Because of this, the only shoe left was one she hadn't used yet. Ian finds this strange. Are the servants mistreating her again? But Clare just says it was her fault for not taking care of the shoes properly. Telling her not to apologize, the Duke asks if she has any idea who did it, and if she will again give a light punishment to whoever did it. After all, even if someone doesn't like her, this went too far since the shoes are property of the dukedom. Ian is indignant and asks her to care more about herself. He believes that making her starve was much worse than the shoes. He asks her to notify him immediately if something happens again, and he also says he will resolve the shoe issue. The servants need to remember whom they serve. The next morning, Clare refuses to get up, still not believing what happened yesterday. It was the first time someone carried her in their arms like that. However, she is surprised by someone knocking on her door. Ian greets her good morning and asks if it's too early for her to get up, but Clare says she was just a little tired. Since her foot was injured yesterday and she never notices her own injuries, Ian decides to skip dance practice today and asks her to sit with them and just talk for today. Clare asks what they could talk about today. The Duke says he would like to know about her childhood, since even though they are married, Ian knows very little about her. Clare explains that she was a child who lived following her grandmother. Everything she did was always with her grandmother, and she taught her practically everything. She was very kind, but also strict. Ian asks if she was the one who taught Clare etiquette, and she says yes. But unfortunately, she passed away when Clare was only 10 years old. He asks if her family hired a tutor after that, but the protagonist says no, because they couldn't afford one. The truth is, they didn't want to spend money on her. They freely spent everything on Amelia, and her mother said that if she cleaned everything, she could study with Amelia afterward. Clearly, she never kept the promise. Noticing that Clare became thoughtful and had a sad expression, Ian apologizes for making her talk about painful things. Ian says that Clare's life is not ordinary at all. Given how perfectly she behaved yesterday, it's hard to believe all the bad things she went through. It impresses him that a child who only learned until the age of 10 could act perfectly like a duchess. She becomes embarrassed and doesn't know what to answer. She just says she never received so many compliments before. Her husband says she should just accept the compliments and that it's okay to be happy about being praised. The protagonist stands up and says she has a phrase from her grandmother that always stuck with her. Learning is not just about waiting, but about stealing. Clare explains that when she was a child, she didn't quite understand what that phrase meant, but over time she realized that no teacher would teach her if she just waited. That's why she decided to steal. On the days her sister had lessons with the tutor, Clare intentionally left the office to clean later so she could hear the entire lesson. As soon as Amelia said goodbye to the tutor, the protagonist took the opportunity to write down everything she had heard. Ian says he didn't imagine Clare had gone through such difficult times. She says that's in the past, but her grandmother's words only made sense after she debuted in high society. Normally, noble women go to tea parties with their mothers when they are young, so they learn about etiquette before debuting. Ian says that's why she always stayed in the corners of the party. Clare explains that it was precisely because she didn't know what to do, so she stayed in the corners while listening to how nobles socialized, how they moved, and that's how she stole mannerisms and refined her imitations. Ian realizes how incredible Clare was. After all, he feels he just waited, since he didn't achieve anything by his own will. The Duchess encourages him by saying that he was able to accomplish everything that came to him, which is also impressive. One example is the fact that he chose her to marry precisely to be with the woman he loves in the future, and thus he can save Clare too. Standing up, the Duke says he was very happy to hear more about her, and that they should do this more often. The maid calls them for breakfast. Noticing that Clare is still walking with difficulty, he asks if she prefers him to carry her to the table. Obviously, she refuses, and while laughing, he says he asked the servants to bring the food to the room. After breakfast, Clare was attended to by the doctor who treated her foot injuries, and Ian bought new shoes for her. A maid approaches and asks if she could speak with the Duchess. She says her name is Emma, and says that she actually believes Annie was responsible for destroying the shoes. Clare finds it strange and asks why Emma is saying this. She says that since Annie is the Duchess's personal maid, she has easy access to the room, and last night Emma witnessed something. Annie was holding a pair of scissors in the hallway with a somber expression. That's why she's sure it was Annie who destroyed the shoes. Apparently, she hasn't liked the Duchess from the beginning. However, Emma says that since she is still new to the mansion, the only thing she could do was observe, but now she would like to help the Duchess. Clare says she appreciates the concern, but Emma shouldn't blame someone without proof, and merely holding scissors in the hallway isn't sufficient evidence. She concludes by saying that for now, she won't take this accusation seriously, but if Emma knows anything else, she is free to tell. Emma says that she and Annie are from the same village, and Annie frequently caused trouble there. The Duchess says she will be fine, and that to avoid bothering others, Emma should keep it a secret from them. Walking through the hall, Clare notices a painting of her husband when he assumed the title of Duke. Looking at the portrait, she wonders what he would think of Emma's story. Would Annie really do that to her? Even after all the help she gave her? Although she is strict, Clare hasn't noticed any malice in her actions or words. Moreover, she works diligently and always cares about others. Clare decides not to say anything to anyone for now. A few days later, rumors that Annie ruined the Duchess's shoes have already spread among the staff. And since her reputation wasn't good for having made the Duchess go hungry, everyone quickly believed the rumor. Furthermore, they didn't miss the opportunity to offend the Duchess, saying she was probably Annie's puppet. Annie meets Clare in the office and asks why she hasn't said anything about the rumors yet, but the Duchess merely says she cannot stop people from talking. This leaves Annie dismayed that she doesn't care and hasn't fired her yet. Annie asks if the Duchess happens to know what the staff calls her, and she replies that she does know. Annie's puppet, coward, and a few others she can't remember. The maid asks if she knows this. Why doesn't she do anything about it? If the Duchess just fires her, it will probably solve the problem. Clare asks if the rumors are true and if it was really Annie who destroyed the shoes. Annie replies yes. However, the Duchess says there is no proof it was her. Annie, worried, says that if she doesn't fire her, the other staff won't respect her. And Clare, laughing, replies that they never respected her anyway. Annoyed, the maid bangs on the table and asks how the Duchess can laugh at such a thing, and says that she herself will resign. The protagonist notices that Annie is acting differently today. Normally, she talks while looking into her eyes, but today she can't. The Duchess replies to Annie, saying she cannot resign because her current role is a punishment for what she did previously. But for her not to worry, if it really was her who ruined the shoes, she will be punished. So the Duchess asks her to wait until there is proof. Annie says she will wait a bit, but if nothing happens, she will go to the Duke herself and confess. Clare asks if Annie knows the new maid named Emma and if the two are close. Annie explains that they only lived in the same village but are not close. The Duchess then asks Annie to call her. Something isn't right. Would Annie really do something like that? She remembers that she is checking the invitations that had arrived for the Eater household. Since the day of the banquet, several tea party invitations have started arriving, and as Duchess, even if only for a year, she should participate. Emma arrives at the office and asks if there's anything the Duchess needs. Getting straight to the point, the Duchess asks if it was Annie who spread the rumors. She says she just wanted to help and went to ask others if they knew anything, and then apologizes for it. Emma asks the Duchess to give her another chance and allow her to stay by her side, then she will get the proof against Annie. Clare realizes how desperate she is. Normally, being the lady of the house's personal maid is an honor, but in the Eater household, it's a bit different, and she will probably be ridiculed by others. The Duchess decides to accept to better understand Emma's intentions and says it would be good to have one more person to help. Later, the Duke asks if Clare is really going to put Emma to work directly for her, and if the rumors aren't spreading too much. Embarrassed that Ian found out what they were saying about her, she tries to change the subject. Ian says he will trust her because she probably has a plan to make Emma her personal maid. He asks if she really trusts Annie, and Claire says yes. After all, if Annie really hated her, she wouldn't destroy the shoes in that way. Since last time she managed to make the Duchess go without food without the Duke noticing, she wouldn't do something so sloppy. Ian suggests that perhaps they should take another look at the shoes to see if they find any clues. Upon arriving at the closet, they come across May. She is rummaging through all the ruined shoes while crying. When Claire asks what she is doing, May explains that she couldn't believe Annie did it, so she is trying to investigate. Since Annie always took care of the madam, even if she was strict, there's no way she would do something like that. Even believing in her innocence, after looking at the shoes again, May says she couldn't find anything. Claire thanks her for trying to help and tells her not to worry, as they will find the culprit soon. After that, all the insecurity Claire had about Annie passed. If even May trusts Annie, the madam will do the same. The Duchess notices that May's hands are very red. She says they were normal yesterday, but today they started to itch and turn red. Ian asks to examine May's hands. And apparently it doesn't seem like a simple case of flaking due to dryness. He believes it would be good for a doctor to evaluate it. After the doctor arrives and evaluates it, he informs them it's hives, which usually happens from touching plants or insects that cause it. May says she hasn't had contact with anything like that, but the doctor assures her it's not dangerous. She just needs to apply a medication that will make it better. After the doctor leaves, they start thinking about why May got hives. She confirms that she stayed in the closet all night looking at the shoes, so there's no way she could have touched plants or insects. Ian says that maybe the shoes have something to do with it. He puts on a glove and inspects the shoes again. However, after running his hand over the shoe a few times, the glove starts to turn yellow. He wonders what this yellow liquid could be and if it is really the cause of the hives. After making a worried expression, Ian says he's happy Clare never wore the shoes because someone wanted to hurt her on purpose. May questions if this isn't strange. If they put the yellow liquid on the shoe, why did they destroy it right after, making the madam not use them? Probably two people are involved. One who put the liquid and another who destroyed the shoe. Perhaps it's time to be a little stricter with the staff since they've reached the point of putting something to hurt her. Ian wants to call the staff and find the real culprit so things don't get worse. But Claire says she has a plan, so he should trust her. That soon they will know who is plotting this and teach them a lesson in front of everyone. After that, Emma began her work as a personal maid, and every day she blamed Annie or May for items that disappeared from the Duchess and appeared in the belongings of the two. Because of this, the Duchess pretended to favor her on purpose to see if Annie or she would do something, but nothing happened. And Annie didn't reprimand Emma even when she did things wrong. As usual, Emma reported that one of the lipsticks had gone missing today, and she already accused Annie or May of stealing again. Claire just says it's no problem since the lack of a lipstick won't make a difference. Emma, indignant, says that the Duchess cannot tolerate the two because they are stealing, but Claire says they are just small items that are not worth the stress. However, if, for example, the sapphire necklace she wore the other day went missing, then it wouldn't be so easy to let it go. Hearing this, Emma gives a little smile as if she's about to cause trouble. During breakfast, the Duke asks if Claire will go to an afternoon tea this afternoon. She says yes, that she wants to start gradually to get used to it. And Ian says that in the future she can host her own tea party here at the mansion. Since his mother used to hold several gatherings in the garden to show off her splendid roses, he says that if she wants, he can help Claire practice some conversations beforehand. And he would even call Keith to participate in the practice as well. She realizes that lately they are much closer, and he constantly initiates pleasant conversations during meals, which makes her spend much more time in the dining room than she used to at her parents' house. Someone ends up interrupting their coffee as they run into the room. Shouting, Emma says she has a big problem. The sapphire necklace is gone. In the room, Claire checks that the necklace is indeed gone and asks if anyone happens to remember touching it last. Emma turns to Ian and asks him to allow this to be investigated as quickly as possible. He says it's fine, but that they will be the first to be investigated, as they have more contact with the item. Annie and May agree to the search. After searching Emma and May's room, nothing was found, but as soon as they arrived at Annie's room, upon opening the closet, the necklace was inside. At that very moment, Emma immediately started insulting Annie, saying she deserved to be arrested for stealing the Duchess's belongings. Annie merely agrees and says it was her and that she would accept any punishment, in addition to stating again that she was the one who ruined the shoes. Claire says she is disappointed since they were friends. However, as a last act for their friendship, the protagonist says she has an antidote in her hands. Since things kept disappearing, she put a poison on the necklace to catch the culprit. As it is a slow-acting poison absorbed through the skin, there is still time to take the antidote. However, Annie doesn't need to worry, as Claire set aside a single antidote in case she touched the necklace. Before Annie drinks the antidote, Emma becomes desperate. She takes the antidote from Annie's hand and drinks it without hesitation. Seeing the scene, the Duchess asks Emma to explain such behavior. She says that last night she was worried and touched the necklace, but the excuse won't hold up given her current attitude. Shouting, she says she didn't steal it. After all, the necklace was found among Annie's belongings. Claire calmly tells Emma not to worry. After all, if it was someone else, the symptoms of the poison will start to appear and they will discover the culprit. Annie tells Emma that perhaps it's better to give up and surrender since she lost. Annie tells the Duchess that there's no point in waiting, because even if a lot of time passes, she won't show any symptoms since she didn't touch the necklace. Clare then asks Emma to tell what really happened. She finally admits that she was the one who took the necklace, as Annie was acting superior for being the personal maid, and she couldn't stand the situation anymore. The Duchess then asks Emma one more thing: why her hands are red and inflamed. What happened? Emma starts to think of an excuse. But before she can speak, Clare holds her hand and says it's hives caused by a liquid that was put on the ruined shoes, and Emma's hands had been red from the beginning. Trembling all over, she insists on saying that Annie is to blame for her doing these things. Fed up with the situation, Clare asks the Duke if she can leave the rest to him. He then calls 2 butlers and asks them to take Emma to the dungeon. In shock, she questions why Annie's punishment last time was to work for the madam, and hers is to be imprisoned. Clare explains that the situation was different before. Furthermore, all the words Emma speaks are lies, and so she is removed while screaming. The Duchess looks at Annie, expecting an answer. After all, she had been enduring all this silently, even knowing who the real culprit was. Annie explains that she and Emma are from the same village, and because of that, she owes Emma a debt in her mother's name. When she arrived in the room and saw Emma putting something on the shoes, she tried to hide the crime by destroying the shoes. Happy with Annie's action of trying to protect both of them, the Duchess says that Annie should have been sincere from the beginning and told the truth. Apologizing, the maid says she was foolish and is ready to receive her punishment. The punishment chosen by the Duchess was that for exactly 1 year, Annie is forbidden from lying to the Duchess. Emotional? The maid cries, while thanking the Duchess for her trust and kindness. May questions how the young lady managed to buy poison to put on the necklace, and it is then that the Duchess reveals that there was never any poison, and she is impressed by how accurate the madam was. Later, in the Duke's office, Annie came to apologize. He says he didn't call her to punish her, but to find out if there are other people in this mansion who still wish Clare harm. After all, even though Annie's words are harsh, she doesn't seem to want the Duchess harm, and in fact seems to even like her. He questions her why she made the Duchess starve before. Finally, Annie confesses that it was because she heard the other staff saying they would put laxative in her food, not knowing what to do. Annie just destroyed all the food. As they seemed not to stop, Annie took the lead and suggested that it would be better to make the Duchess starve. The Duke becomes extremely irritated for not having noticed all this under his nose. He hands a sheet to Annie and asks her to write down the names of everyone involved in this. After he sees the names, he already imagined who they would be. However, replacing everyone will make Clare notice and get upset. He decides then to ask Annie to keep an eye on them for now. Especially because of the last incident with Emma, it's possible they see Clare as a villain now. He becomes worried about why his wife didn't tell him things. Maybe it's natural not to trust someone who is using you as a wife for a year. Annie says that if there's nothing else he needs, she will withdraw, but Ian says there's one more thing he needs. Then he asks if she knows what Clare likes. Giving a nudge, she says, "Wouldn't the husband know these things better?" But still replies, saying that the Duchess doesn't like flashy things, but she probably likes vibrant things more than she admits. Normally, she always says it's not her style and keeps away, but Annie feels that she is afraid of not suit her more than not liking it. He comments that he wishes Clare had more confidence in herself. Annie comments that there's something that would probably greatly increase the Duchess's confidence. And when he asks what it is, she replies saying it would be his love, filling the Duchess with love and affection. Even not understanding why, Ian feels a great desire to please Clare more and more to see her expression and make her happy. That's it, everyone. What did you think of this work? I personally thought it was super cute. Right now, we've reached the maximum number of chapters available, so part 2 will probably take a little while to come out. I need at least about 12 more chapters to make another video, so we'll have to wait to see this romance develop further. I'm still not sure if she's going to end up with Ian, or if the plot twist will be that she ends up with Keith. What do you think? Don't forget to like the video, comment, and follow the channel so you don't miss any videos. Kisses, and see you next time!